Hello and welcome to yet another edition of Expressions with the New Indian Express. We have the wonderful Dushyanth Sridhar with us today, Indic speaker, author, storyteller, a man who makes our epics come alive through his discourses. I'm really looking forward to listening to him. And we have Dr. S. Vaidhyasubramaniam, who's the Vice Chancellor of SASTRA deemed university, a very erudite man in his own esteem. But of course, today, I think we're both going to be playing the role of listeners and an enraptured audience as Dushyanth speaks. But over to you, Dr. Vaidya, because you know Dushyanth much better, I think, than I do. So please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kaveree, and namaste to Dushyanth. Wonderful to again see you all through this virtual medium for this session of expressions that's brought to you by the New Indian Express Group. I'm extremely happy to share the screen for a change because I've been sharing the stage with Mr. Dushyanth for quite a number of times, and today we are sharing the screen together. And I'm extremely happy to be a part of this conversation, which is titled Realization Pathway. So it's a wonderful topic that's getting us into the, taking us through a different pathway where we have realized that this COVID, which is for the last 2.5 months, turning things upside down, we have been wondering actually what to do in the future, how do we actually recollect what we did in the past and how we are handling the present. So it's a kind of a combination of feelings of individuals and institutions. And in the process, we have realized that there is a lot of, set of values that we have uncorked, be it at the individual level or at the institutional level. So we are also mindful of the fact that a great country like ours, the civilizational continuum that we have had, it's because that we cherish certain civilizational assets. The bedrock of those civilizational assets or the Indic values that we hold it very close to our heart. So I would just try to begin this session by requesting Dushyanth to give us by way of an opening remark for the next 10 to 15 minutes on shaping the contours of the discussion forward as to how these values have shaped the way in which individuals think and behave, the way in which institutions think and behave. And during this period, we also saw the Ramayana and Mahabharata in the TV. So I'm sure he will draw some examples from that as well. Besides other ancient wisdom through scriptures, how all of this have been able to realize, make us realize that fundamentally the underlying current that defines institutional and individual values have a very strong bondage with our Indic assets. So that will form the opening remarks of Dushyanth, after which maybe I will engage with him with 3 or 4 questions and then take a few audience questions before we wrap up. So the duration for this entire event is going to be for 90 minutes. And over to you, Mr. Dushyanth. Please leave the audience enlightened in a style that is uniquely and characteristically yours. Over to Mr. Dushyanth. Dushyanth, you are not audible.
Am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yeah. My namaskarams to the both of you, Kaveree ji and Vaidya, and of course to the wonderful meeting that has been arranged for a very global audience. But now that even I am getting used to a very fixed audience in front of my screen, I wouldn't even let the both of you even scratch your nose. So I'm just going to keep looking at your faces. The word in Sanskrit for capturing or grasping or catching hold of something is grahanam. In Hindi also, we use the word grahan. And now is the period today, this day, we are caught between two grahanams. We were just done with a lunar eclipse recently. And on the 21st of June, we will be coming across a solar eclipse. So we are caught between two grahanams.
Right.
So one is a Chandra Grahanam, one is a Surya Grahanam. And we are blessed with the sun's rays and the moon's nectarine rays every day. So as Vaidya wanted me to put forth some realization or probably some points that have dawned my way. One, as a person who has been a fan, a follower, and to some extent a critique as well of the Indic civilization that we have bequeathed or we have inherited, I have wondered at the process of we visiting a temple. So right from my childhood days, be it in the days of Chennai, Bangalore, or even Bombay, where I worked for some time, whenever I would visit a temple that follows a certain agama science, we would be offered the holy water. It's called the tirtham. So I used to wonder, the priest used to offer the water thrice. He used to offer it once, the second time, and the third time. And he knew based on the metro's water availability, will the proportion of the water given to me also vary? And that I've spent quite a considerable time in Chennai. I would know that they will even go to very, very abysmally, very low levels. Nevertheless, it used to be given thrice. And as a person who was inquisitive about knowing answers to these steps, I would ask why. And the preceptor, my acharya who taught me the science of Vedanta, used to say, each time he gives you, it is to draw or take away the evil effects of three kinds of worries that an individual is bound to face. One is called Adhyatmika, second is called Adi Daivika, third is Adi Bhautika. It has been said in our scriptures that there is agony to an individual, be it to Kaveree, be it to Vaidya, to anybody in the audience, or be it to me, based on what my body and my mind has to offer. So if my mind is clear, I'm fine. Else I will have problems because of it. There are some miseries caused by those creatures that are around me. For example, if you ask people who live in the villages of Kerala or in the borders of Tamil Nadu, they'll say every day our fields are trampled by elephants and then they are destroyed by wild boars. So you will have problems caused by creatures. And the third comes when there is a natural disaster. I'm sure India has been a very, very strong survivor to many, many disasters like the tsunami, the earthquake, and so on. Now, to drive away the effects of all this is what you call it as three times you offer water: Adhyatmika, Adi Daivika, and Adi Bhautika. So I was wondering where Corona fits in, because it is not exactly caused by a tangible feature. We can't see it through our naked eyes. At the same time, it is something like a big disaster to the world. So, and the depression that it causes in us, it fits into every category. So it's Adhyatmika, Adi Devika, and Adi Bhautika. That way, Corona is very, very unique, a maverick in its own way. Probably an early second is because it fits into every category. So if you ask about the realization that it has given us, or probably to me, or to the society on the whole, 2-3 levels that we can discuss. One, as an individual. Second, as an institution. Earlier, till about the pre-corona period, we have seen that individuals were empowering an institution. So the parents and the students got together to empower the institution called the school or the college. And the employees of an organization came together and empowered the institution called the IT consulting firm or a boutique consulting firm or an investment banking firm. Now we see the other way happening, which is the institution is empowering the individuals. So as a son to a teacher, my mother is a teacher, I can tell you that now she largely may depend on the students attending the online classes, they taking the onus to sit for the entire period of 1 hour, the parents also equally contributing to ensure that the child sits for that 1 hour. So the triangle, which is the student, parent, and the teacher relationship has kind of now leveled. And if I have to talk about the work from home concept, because I was with the corporate career after I graduated from Pilani for about 6.5 years. So work from home then was okay, but still my managers and my supervisors would say, see, once in a week is okay. See, you'll have to show your face. You'll have to make yourself visible in the office. See, then only your appraisal will be guaranteed and you'll get the right quantum of bonus, and sure, you'll get a promotion. So the presence in the office, more than the work, it was to ensure that the other person trusts me. But today we are not forced, but we have to empower ourselves to trust the other individual, that he will sit at home and he will work with full dedication. And probably the best example that Vaidya wanted some anecdotes or some illustrations from our scriptures. When Bhagavad Gita begins on the first day of the Mahabharata Yuddham that happened for a series of 18 days. On the first day, Dhritarashtra, the king who was the sovereign king who was ruling Hastinapura, he asked his driver, a charioteer, come advisor. So his name was Sanjaya. So he asked Sanjaya, what's happening between my sons and Pandu's sons? So Bhagavad Gita doesn't begin with the questioner's name. It doesn't begin with Arjuna Vacha. It doesn't begin with Krishna's words, Bhagavan Vacha. It begins with Dhritarashtra Vacha. And Dhritarashtra asks, Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre, Samaveta, Yuyutsavaha, Mamaka Pandavaschaiva, Kimakurvata Sanjaya. What is happening? And Sanjaya narrates what he sees from a distance. And it concludes with the concluding remarks of Sanjaya, who says, Yatra Yogeshwara Krishnaha, Yatra Partho Dhanurdharaha, Tatra Shri Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruvanitir Matir Mama. So the point is, Dhritarashtra, who was very, very anxious about the survival of his sons, about the property and the wealth that they should be inheriting, was not present on the battlefield. He was not in the office. Let's assume battlefield is the office. He was not in the office then. He was not in that space then. But he had to trust the means of the knowledge getting dispensed, which is the technology, which is Sanjaya. So he completely relied on what Sanjaya said. And today, even today, our product called Bhagavad Gita is a concept of work from home. Had Dhritarashtra not asked and Sanjaya not answered, trust me, we would have never known what those 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita were, because it was a very private conversation that happened between Krishna and Arjuna. And nobody was even 10 yojanas or 10 feet close. So Bhishma, in fact, was telling Duryodhana that Duryodhana, don't keep troubling me with questions, because I am just waiting for that piecemeal of the wind that can carry at least one word of what they are speaking, but I'm not able to hear. So that conversation was so private and confidential. Had it not been the technology then called Sanjaya, I'm not trying to put words like Wi-Fi and all that with Sanjaya, but Sanjaya was a means of dispensing knowledge from one corner to the other. So today, this COVID has made us realize that trusting individuals is going to empower institutions. So individuals don't have to come together and empower an institution. If the institution trusts the individual, that is the first step. Now coming to, I did quote about students' education online, be it schools, middle schools or high schools, where parents also equally contribute, because parents are initially anxious because they have to take the effort to make them sit, listen, and probably they have even started evaluating teachers because the parents get to know how good the teacher is. And they can always decrease or increase the quantum of the fees payment based on that. So it works on the Boyle's law concept. Nevertheless, here, I do remember one example from Ramayana. Now that I've quoted Mahabharata, I'll just take up Ramayana, because the four sons, Girvanair, Arthyamano, Dashamukanidaram, Kosalesh Vrisheshange, Putriya Mishtimishtva, Dadushi, Dasharatakshma Bhride, Payasagriam, Tad Bhuktva, Tad Purandhrishvapi, Trishu Samam, Jatagarbha Sujato, Ramastvam, Lakshmanena, Swayamata Bharatenapi, Shatrughna Namna. These four sons of Dasharatha, be it Rama, Bharata, Lakshmana, and Shatrughna, one thing that was very common was they never changed their school. So their tutelage was absolutely dedicated and assigned to one person called Vasishtha. So in those days, it was called a pathantaram. Patha means lesson. So when you learn music or dance, it's always better to stick to one school of learning, because the moment you start learning from 3, 4 people, probably your music may get skewed. So be it Rama and his other brothers who enjoyed a wonderful fraternity, they all learned their tutelage was under Vasishtha. Now, when a new system called Vishwamitra came in, he wanted Rama to be lent for 6 nights so that he could be the protector of his sacrifice. So he comes and asks, Swaputram Rajashardula Ramam Satyaparakramam Kakapaksha Dharam Veeram Jeshtham Me Datumarhasi. O king, give me the darkest of your sons. Probably if this were the statement uttered in the US or Minneapolis these days, probably it will even add more fuel to Floyd. But as a country and a civilization, we have believed that black is beautiful. So most images in the south of India, the deities are black, so much so that the devotees actually frown when they see the marble images. So we are so used to the color black that racism has never been our cup of tea. So the point here is, so he asks, give me the darkest of your sons. He says, Kakapaksha Dharam Veeram. Dasharatha understands, but he's very skeptical. He says, how can I send my son? He's the apple to my eye, and my soul, my Atma rests in him. That's when the original teacher called Vasishtha says, there's no harm in attempting and giving a chance to a new teacher, which is a new system of education. So today, if online teaching has been recommended as one of the modes to dispense knowledge, parents as well as institutions should not feel very nervous and should not feel wary about how this system is going to work, because everything is a trial. Probably as a country, Kaveree, you will appreciate this. We have had Sanskrit poets immensely from the times of Bhasa, Kalidasa, Magha, Bhartrihari, Bharavi, Dandi. Then we had Bhojaraja, we had Nilakantha Dikshita, Vedanta Deshika, many, many poets. They all have one thing to say in common. Don't discard something just because it seems new. Don't seem to blindly appreciate and accept just because something is old or ancient. If something is regarded old or ancient, you have the right to question it if you feel the questions should be asked. Something is new, if it is good, accept it. So if online mode of teaching is the order of the day, we have to openly and wholeheartedly support the system. At the same time, to blatantly conclude that this is the only way ahead is going to be a bit problematic, because as human beings, we of course, I need, even if I'm seeing Kaveree today, probably after 6 months I would like to see her in person. I wouldn't just want to keep seeing a person just on my computer. This is also one mode of seeing. That is also one mode of seeing. So while the sons of Dasharatha, namely Rama and Lakshmana, were sent along with Vishwamitra upon the recommendation of Vasishtha, Vasishthopi Mahatejaha, it is the acceptance of a new system of education. Now, another point that I would like to make is with respect to personal hygiene. See, while I used to work in Bombay, and I used to have a group of friends who used to sit with me, and we used to sit and eat. They used to take their spoons and forks and used to put into my plates. And they would want to have the same share of food, but all of us were having the same channa and batura. So nothing would taste better in my plate. Nevertheless, they would, it's always that friendliness that brings in. But my only point even then, that was pre-corona period. And still I would say that I'm ready to share my piece of food with you at the start. But once you are tasting in your spoon, please don't put that spoon into mine. Not because probably they may have a feeling that there is still untouchability in Dushyant's mind. No, it was as simple as hygiene. So in those days, if I would tell my friends, they would say, "Hey, kya bakra hai tu?" Now, even washed plates of somebody else, we don't want to use. So we have reached that stage. In Tamil, Kaveree, there is a saying, "Vecha kudumi, Saracham Mutta," which means, which generally implies you take extremes of position. So you either say, I will have food with everybody anywhere, or now we have landed in a situation where we say that I wouldn't even drink in the same tumbler in which you're drinking. So I think we need to maintain that balance. Probably as a civilization, when the country has evolved, it is over a period of time that it gets embellished. So our set of practices, our set of thoughts, everything adds value to it. And it may change and get polished over a period of time. So we can accept the certain practices of the past, make some amends to it, and try to coin a new version. Probably one of the stars, Rajnikant, will like this. So we can have a 2.0 to all these practices. So we need to have versions to it. And one thing that I would want to conclude, because I think we'll have a discussion after this, one thing that I would like to conclude is, how do we care about nature? So when we are zoology and botany students, we often refer to them as flora and fauna. So there is a plant kingdom, there is an animal kingdom. So I'm including everything that's reptiles also under animal kingdom. I'm not getting into the phylum, Coelenterata, Annelida, Arthropoda and all that. It just says flora and fauna. So how can we as individuals be considerate towards it? See, it's often cited or probably misconceived or misinterpreted that Sanatana Dharma, which is today in most application forms written as Hinduism, has been very, very strict and made vegetarianism mandatory. It is a very, very misinterpreted statement, because vegetarianism has never been made mandatory in Sanatana Dharma. So we have had Kshatriyas who have had their fair share of meat after hunting. So probably you can put like this: if one aspires to better spiritual realm, then vegetarianism may be recommended. So there are certain communities who have made it a habit to not consume, but there are certain communities who are absolutely allowed. And in fact, two examples, one from Mahabharata, where we have one person called Dharma Vyadha. The only duty of this person was to dispense what the nuances of dharma is. And he was the butcher in a country called Videha Desha. And as he used to cut pieces of meat, Vyasa and other rishis used to stand in a queue to get their doubts cleared. So that is one. Second thing, when Rama manages to kill the monkey king of Kishkinta called Vali, Vali has a volley of questions to ask. He asks Rama, just because your wife has been kidnapped or abducted, it doesn't mean out of frustration you can kill anybody you see. And I happen to be a monkey. And if you would justify stating that you're a Kshatriya who's allowed to hunt, please consider this, Rama. An elephant is generally poached or hunted for ivory. Certain animals for their hide. Certain animals for the flesh. I don't fall into the flesh category, because I'm sure whatever best of the cuisines you make with monkey flesh, I'm sure it's not going to taste good. I don't have ivory. I don't have the nails to make ornaments of. I have nothing in me. Why have you killed? So he says one statement in Ramayana, Pancha Panchanakaha Bhakshya. Shastras have said that five-nailed 5 animals alone can be consumed by non-vegetarians. I, as a monkey, don't fall into this category. Why did you kill? So this conversation, I've brought it into picture because ultimately our care for nature has been very, very minimal. Whether we would like to attribute this entire pandemic to one laboratory or to one city, that's different. But we have been very, very asympathetic towards animals in the long run. So we, as human beings, we should know how to strike a balance between our consumption and humane behavior. Anything and everything in nature doesn't belong to us. If that was the case, we shouldn't be crying over the death of individuals and humans today, because we have never bothered about the death of so many other things. So this corona period should make us realize how can we better our practices in society. So probably in a nutshell, yes, this period has been a wonderful sabbatical for us to sit, think, to some extent realize, and in the future, realization alone may not help, to act upon. So this is the way probably I can conclude my opening remarks. I know it was like a rigmarole, but still, it is.
Dr. Vaidya, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a couple of questions, and
Please go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things that struck me, Dushyant from what you were saying. One was that why do you consider this period a sabbatical? Should it not be actually the model for the way forward? As you said, why can this period not be 2.0? rather than a sabbatical before we get into 2.0. After all, what is it that we have not done that it cannot be held to example? We worked diligently from home. We have lived with much less than we used to. We've rediscovered how to be frugal. We have rediscovered balance in our lives. We have rediscovered the value of family, of friends. There are so many things that we have done, which actually we should now just make it a part of our lives. So I wanted to ask you, instead of a sabbatical, would you not consider this to be the model for the way forward?
Kaveree, you are right in a way when you say this is a period for us to think and act upon and not to relax. So that's what you say, that don't call it a sabbatical
Yeah,
where we've withdrawn ourselves. See, initially when it started on the March 24th till about the April end, it was like a sabbatical because we didn't know that there's going to be an enormity. We still thought that the numbers are going to reduce and we are going to flatten. But when we know that countries are suffering, even advanced economies are
yeah,
suffering, now we have realized. So it's been the journey from the lockdown of March 24th till now, and how many ever days it's going to extend. It's like this. So initially, it was like a sabbatical in our minds, and then we started creating models for ourselves. And probably this discussion itself is a beautiful resultant of that model thinking.
yeah.
So if it was a sabbatical, you're not going to call me and I'm not going to speak. But the initial days were like that. So it began like a sabbatical. And now I'm sure more than the corona curve peaking, I think our model of thinking should peak
Yes, yes,
during this period.
yeah.
So you're right that way.
Yeah, and the second point that struck me,
Mm,
whenever we talk of India, especially, we
mm,
tend to veer from one extreme to the other, in all our behaviors, in our ideologies, and the yoga way of life is all about balance of mind,
mm,
body, spirit.
mm.
Why do we have to be taught this again and again when it is so intrinsic to our lives? Why have we not, why do we discover it when we're, say, 50 years old or 60 years old? Why is it not part of our value system from the get-go, part of our education system? Why is it that yoga is still seen as something that is a physical exercise, which of course it is, but there is so much more? And why does it not become this balance, which is so important, which we are now discovering? Why is it not a part of our lives?
Two quick examples, Kaveri. One, as a student in my school days, after coming home, if my grandparents would tell me this is the way of adding two numbers, this is the
Right,
way of subtracting a number from the other, I would say, no, no, my teacher has taught me in a certain way.
right,
So, as a student, at least in the early days of primary school, the teacher becomes the authority of dispensing knowledge. Even if my grandparents were postdoctorates, and if my teacher was still an undergrad, my teacher is the source. Second, I have heard my grandparents say, see, in my childhood days, I never had the opportunity, or I didn't make use of the opportunity of learning these scriptures and this way of our quintessential knowledge. I am giving this to you at a young age. They used to tell me, I'm giving this to you at a young age so that at this age where you can grasp things easily, you can do it. Now, what's happening to us is probably at the age of 40, 50, and 60, people through lectures, demonstrations, seminars, webinars have started realizing
yeah,
the essence of our heritage knowledge. But then to grasp, they either don't have their memory cells at the peak,
yeah,
one, or second, they have too many other things to engage them, their family, their livelihood, and
right,
so on. And when it's student days, probably our school system, honestly, this is my opinion, I'm not blaming the school system, it is not wholesome in nature. See, as much as I would like to learn about the value of pi, which is 22 by 7, what could have come from the Greek and the Western mathematicians, I would also like to understand the shloka which says Chaturadika Shatam Ashtagunam Dva Ayushascha, which is 62,832 divided by 20,000, which gives you 3.1416, is what Aryabhatta tells in the 6th century.
right,
So, as a student, probably I should get the best of both worlds. I
yeah,
should be made to realize that the Western world has contributed as much as our Indian scholars. So if I'm going to learn the infinite series of integral calculus, I should also learn the Madhava Madhava series of the Sangamagrama School of Mathematics of Kerala. So I honestly feel, if your question about why should we be taught again, why should that be reiterated again, I feel the education system has to be slightly tweaked. If I say it should be added, nothing has to be deleted, just addition. That little addition will help us create many, many generations of realized souls, rather than sitting on their heads in the age of 50 and 60 and telling them there's going to be no change there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And you know, the children by the time have already grown up. You have a new generation which knows even less than the previous generation.
True.
Over to you, Dr. Vaidya.
Yeah, I just want to pick from where you left. Not that I know I would be doing it better than what Dushyanth said on the question of why for the individual when it should have been done at the early stages. See, the concept of value itself, I recall Swami Dayanand Saraswati's definition of value itself. A value is a value if the value of the value is valuable to oneself. So it becomes the individual who has to cherish and acknowledge the importance of what you say is valuable, and it has to be perceived with the same value by another individual. But the unfortunate part is it is within the same individual that the good and the bad resides. So the amount of good or the amount of bad decides whether one is valuable or not valuable. And that's how another Acharya explained how in these four yugas, if you begin with the first yuga, the Krita yuga, where the good and the evil were in two different worlds together, Devas and Asuras. And then following the Krita yuga, after Krita yuga, the Dwapara yuga, there were also conflicts between the good and the bad, but each of them were distinguished. If you take, for example, in Ramayana, which was in the second yuga, the good was in Bharat, the evil was in Lanka. And then in the Mahabharata, it was in the same country, but between two families, the good in the family of Pandavas, while the bad in the family of the Kauravas. But in the Kali Yuga alone, you see it is in the same individual, and hence human behavior is evolutionary, and there should be constant learning and understanding. And that's precisely why, you know, our behavior is an evolutionary process, and we keep learning things as we go by. Now, it's a good way to start this discussion. And Dushyanth has really touched two important concepts. He defined the new teacher in Vishwamitra, and then the new mechanism of transmitting information when he's picked up Sanjaya. So you have defined a new teacher, a new way to transmit the information. Now, as an education administrator myself, I am concerned about how a new student has to be. You have a new teacher, you have a new way to transmit information. And the new student is belonging to Gen Y. Now, this Gen Y, I always say, they're called Gen Y not because it is Y, because they keep asking the question always, why? So whatever we ask them to do, they keep asking us, why should we do it? So the more and more rules you have in place, the more and more you would like to break it. And this Corona is a very big learning experience for us in terms of how self-discipline is very essential. Now, as an advice to me, because I also teach students, now how do we ensure that this generation of students, which is going to be the new student in a new environment, understand this basic virtue of self-discipline? Those days you had, vritas and penance, and people inculcated certain virtues through all of those instruments. But now, you cannot afford to do penance. So what are the modern mechanisms by which this new student is also ethically conscious? When we do an online assessment, students are outsmarting. They know how to beat the system also. So the value in a new student, how can we make sure that we are able to transmit that without any transmission loss?
Vaidya, I heard your question. I would like to answer it in two parts. One, your question was about how is the entire game of self-discipline going to permeate into every individual? In your case, as a person who runs a very, very esteemed university, you will want your students to inculcate self-discipline. Ramayana has a two-step process. One, Hanuman as a character. See, we have to realize, of course, we have so much of adoration and love for Hanuman that anything that's powerful, anything that's magnificent is Hanuman in temples these days. But let's look at Hanuman as a person who is a self-made individual. He outshined his father and mother. So he was the only monkey in his generation to have done a PhD in grammar. So he's called a Navavyakarana Pandita. So he knew 9 forms of grammar. So he is a self-made individual. One thing about Hanuman is he had so much of power, prowess, and knowledge that there is one anecdote which says that he was cursed not to know his very own power until and unless somebody reminds him of that. So when somebody else reminds me of what my prowess or my talent is, we in management parlance call it motivation. So Hanuman, to fly to Lanka, so we can call it fly, or we can even, to use the right technical term, we can call that levitating. So he levitated like a bird. So he made his body so light and hollow that he could jump over from one place to the other. So Hanuman, before he even took off from India, from a place called Mahendragiri, which is Tirukkurungudi near Tirunelveli in the south of India, he was not aware that he had the ability to go to Lanka until he had another person called Jambavan who told him that you have the ability to fly. Right. So this was enough for Hanuman to get all the lost power back, and he could fly. Once he reaches Lanka, because his only mission was to search Sita, and the beauty about Hanuman is he has never seen a human lady, forget Sita. So his only identification was that she will be different from the general male and she will have a tail. Because the only women he has seen is Ruma and Tara, the wives of Vali and Sugriva. So he hasn't had a profile pic of Sita, nothing before. So he goes on to Lanka, searching for Sita, room after room, harem after harem. At one point in time, in Valmiki's Ramayana, there is a juncture where Hanuman says, I'm going to commit suicide. So he comes to a conclusion where he says that I'm going to commit suicide. The person whom we adore, revere, and deify is saying that I'm going to commit suicide. Right. The very next second after he pre-concludes that he's going to commit suicide, then he thinks, see, if I'm going to commit suicide, one day or the other, with the stink, the foul, probably we had a foul that came from Ghatkopar and Chandivali yesterday. So the foul smell that would emanate from my decaying body will make people realize, and probably this information will reach India. And the moment Sugriva gets to know that his best advisor called as Hanuman is dead, he may also die of an attack. When Sugriva dies of an attack, his closest MOU friend, Memorandum of Understanding friend, Rama will also die. So if Rama dies, Lakshmana will die. So there are about 20 verses in Ramayana where Hanuman thinks, what will be the repercussions if I do this? Right. Then what he does is, he says, I will motivate myself. So he says that I will search Sita now. See, the first step was he needed Jambavan to motivate him. Second is where he motivated himself. Likewise, self-discipline to a very small extent can be taught by you or any other institution. It is left to the individual to realize and practice it. If the individual fails to realize even after these pandemic times, we have to live with it. He has to live with it, and we have to live with such people in the society. The society is not going to get idealistic in the days to come. Yeah. Probably it may get topsy-turvy, but self-discipline is absolutely a third-person motivation and self-motivation. Right. So what you're doing is a marvel. Please continue doing it towards the beneficiaries of your institution, but don't even worry if that may not be permeating into them, because that's their karma. We leave it there.
So I'm not going to have a course with a syllabus on self-discipline and then push it for a 3-credit course with exams and all of that stuff. I will just make students realize its importance and then leave it as a third-party intervening variable. The other part that you also touched so beautifully in your opening remarks is that you cannot discard anything because it is new, nor can you ignore anything because it is old. And again, we have a COVID experience on that, where, on one extreme, we have modern science working very hard to come out with a vaccine. On the other extreme, we also have the ancient wisdom through our Siddha and Ayurveda combinations, also trying to come out with a prescriptive cure for COVID. And both of these, run on parallel tracks, and both are necessary to ensure that this train of knowledge keeps going in a balanced way. Now, moving forward, how do you think that we have to realize the fact that both are necessary, both need to coexist? There is as much as good in both, that somewhere, though the parallel tracks don't meet, the knowledge resources converge at some point, and we'll have to appreciate the convergence of modern science and ancient wisdom. Do you think that's possible?
Uh, a question that has been very beautifully coined and articulated by you. Before I could just answer this question, a kind of a disclaimer that I would like to state, because this answer requires this disclaimer. We as a society, I can't comment about a lot of other nationalities. I have had the opportunity to address a lot of countries and their nationalities, but pertaining to the nationality or the country where we live in with our society, I can say that we have been infatuated with certain way of speaking and acting. Imagine if the same conversation were to be done in a language that you and I speak, for example, Tamil. Probably a set of students who go to the international schools and deemed and the very good universities may think, just because it's in a regional language, these people will not be able to speak in English. So English has become a benchmark for us for anything which is right, scientific, and sophisticated. One. And second thing is, we look at the external features. So suppose if I'm going to carry a mark on my forehead, like how you and I do, I will be conceived as a person who's absolutely religious, fundamentalist in nature, ready to pick up arms or fight or troll anybody. This is how people may think. But I will have 100 questions on our own scriptures. They may not realize. So we have had a certain picture that we create out of people. Only if that goes will we be able to appreciate modern science and medicine and ancient Ayurveda with equal poise. Because today, if a person says, Ayurveda says, take pepper powder, little curcumin lungasta, which is turmeric, little jeera, boil them with water and consume, and this will help you develop immunity. If my grandmother says this, probably I have a misconception because she has not crossed her 8th standard. So I believe what she says is wrong. Whereas when the same thing comes from an ICMR of the best of the epidemiologists, see what they are saying. So our concept is not knowledge. We look at the knowledge giver. We start looking at who is dispensing that knowledge. Only if we unlearn the process of that will we be able to learn. So when I keep telling my audience or suggesting my audience to learn something good, we should learn how to unlearn what we have learned bad. So when there is so much of things that we have already clogged our minds with, it will not help. But nevertheless, quick answer to your question. Ayurveda Siddha, how our government calls it as Ayush these days. So we have various modes of dispensing. Ultimately, we are looking to nature for solution, raw nature. So raw herbs, raw shrubs, raw plants, raw seeds, raw fruits. This is what we are looking at solution. Anything, begin from Ayurveda till Siddha, all of these ancient modes of helping patients is largely preventive in nature. It is not to a large extent curative in nature. Suppose I have a corona patient today. By giving him this concoction may not help him immediately, but it is preventive in nature. It may help, but largely preventive in nature. Modern science, leave alone the vaccines. Otherwise, if you look at modern science or modern medicine, it is more curative in nature. So they work on different fields, but we can touch both fields. As a person, till the corona arrives, I can still trust what Ayurveda says, still continue using black pepper. I can continue using jeera. I can continue using turmeric. I can let them boil, have it with honey. Nothing wrong. So that's preventive. Suppose I get corona, I can still go to my doctor and get one of, probably, if it's a, if it is recommended to take hydroxychloroquine, or if it's Telmisar, or whatever is the drug, the generic or the specific drug, I can take. So I should learn how to appreciate, because one comes from a different level of playing field called preventive. The other comes from curative. Even if it is vaccines, which are generally taught to us as being preventive in nature, we will be, any prudent, very, very careful doctor will always say, I have given you the vaccine for typhoid. It doesn't mean you will never get typhoid. Every doctor will say that you may still get typhoid, but it may not be with a high intensity. So probably modern medicine and ancient medicine, which we akin to Ayurveda and Siddha, should be treated with equal poise. Nothing should be disregarded. At the same time, if time being the doctor says, take this medicine, I should take. And until corona affects us, there's absolutely no harm in following some recommended concoctions for corona. So I feel it's one's attitude towards learning and accepting new things, Vaidya.
May I just ask one question here,
Yeah.
Dushyanth?
Oh, sure.
One of the things that struck us during the lockdown, and a lot of people commented on it, was the discipline with which most people adhered to it. By and large, we as a society showed some remarkable discipline, which we are not particularly known for. Would you agree with that? And how do you assess that? Is that something ingrained in us? Because we don't normally show that level of discipline, do we?
Yeah, and I have a firm belief that in the months to come, we will still not continue showing that discipline. Because discipline is something that is a quality that should come from within us,
Right.
with the due regard to discipline, not
Right.
to our life.
Right.
See, I feel whatever steps we take with social distancing and not spitting and maintaining distances, all this is with the absolute fear that what if corona comes to me?
Right.
My life matters a lot. Actually, it may not to a large extent, but still I have an opinion that my
Yeah.
life matters a lot to this world. And what will happen to the entire ecosystem of this world if I die? Everything will stop. I'm completely indispensable. So this is the thought that I have. So I feel the discipline that we are seeing today in the society may seem good, but that's absolutely an illusionary or a superficial layer of that we are seeing. It's not coming out of, to a large extent, maybe to some extent it would have changed in some, but it is coming out of fear for survival in life.
Right.
I feel if and only when a person realizes that, let's assume there's the corona curve is going to get flattened.
Right.
Should the person stop spitting on the ground or not?
Right.
Simple.
Yeah.
So that should still continue. See,
Yeah.
my value for nature is immaterial of whether there's corona or no corona.
Right.
So only if these practices continue with us or within us towards our society, even after we have flattened the curve of corona, can we say that as a society we have matured to an extent. Otherwise, I feel it's absolutely the fear for survival and not discipline at all.
Just an additional question, sorry. You talked about karma, and everybody, of course, has their own karma. Yet, India and Indians tend to be so judgmental. We think that that person is bad or that person is good, but actually he or she is just following his own karma. That may be that person's karma to be like that.
True.
So why have we become so judgmental? Though we know this intrinsically, yet we have become so judgmental of each other.
See, today we say that we as Indians who have followed this Indian civilization have believed in karma, and why do we do this? My honest opinion is we are not doing anything much to empower ourselves with that knowledge.
Right.
Being in India or being in Chennai or being in Bangalore doesn't mean I'm harnessing that knowledge. Knowledge is in the air. I am not making use of it. See, how many of us even try to look at books that speak about the ancient practices? How should my approach to myself and to a person like Kaveree be? So everything goes on misconceptions and prejudices. So I feel living in a country or living in a subcontinent doesn't mean I naturally inherit that knowledge, unless and until I take efforts to get that knowledge. Point number one. And point number two, as a civilization and largely as Sanatana Dharma and the inbuilt different philosophies like Advaita, Visishta Advaita, Dvaita, Bheda Bheda, Achintya Bheda Bheda, which is dualism, qualified non-dualism. And we have theologies like Vaishnavism, Shaivism, Shaktism, and so on. All these have wonderful scriptures and wonderful practitioners. And each of these, however different they are in their tenets, they have all addressed an individual. We should remember, Sanatana Dharma addresses an individual. It doesn't address the society because it believes that if Kaveree as an individual changes, if Vaidhya as an individual changes, if Dushyanth as an individual changes, where is the need for me to address the society? Because we three make the society. So it is the individual's efforts to harness knowledge, realize, and work upon it. So I feel in the last few years, our attention has been grabbed upon certain other things. I wouldn't call them detrimental, but certain irrelevant, unwarranted things that may have taken us from the knowledge of the past, because India as a subcontinent, as a civilization, has never been judgmental of any religion, any community, any caste. Had it been the case, we wouldn't have the oldest mosque in India of the 7th century.
Right.
We wouldn't have the Jews taking asylum in India. We wouldn't have the Israeli constitution thanking India for having been very considerate and benevolent towards the Jews.
Right.
We wouldn't have Buddhism. Buddhism and Hinduism, remember, in tenets, we are deadly opposite each other.
Right.
But today we've gotten so friendly that we accept Buddha, who propagated that religion, as one of the incarnations of Vishnu.
Right.
So Arkaha, Vajasanihi, Shringi, Jayantaha, Sarva Vijayi, these are the names that come in Vishnu Sahasranama that denote Buddha. And Mahavira, whom Jainism appreciates, and Jainism and Hinduism are absolutely diametrically opposite.
Right.
But today, if I visit a Belur and a Halebeedu temple of the Hoysala architecture in Karnataka, I make it a point to visit the Gomateshwara and Shravana Belagula, who belongs to Mahavira period. So, as a subcontinent, we probably, I can put it this way, there is no other step that we can take to get more inclusive than this. Probably, we as practitioners of Sanatana Dharma should continue realizing that we belong to a very inclusive civilization. At the same time, all other religions should also realize that Hinduism has been very inclusive, and we should also be equally reciprocative and appreciative of Hinduism. See, there has always been a question that people have asked me in interviews. Do you feel we should show tolerance? I say we should not show tolerance. We should show mutual respect.
Right.
Why should I tolerate? See, I don't have to tolerate Kaveree. I respect Kaveree.
Right.
See, it's mutual respect. This tolerance word should be squeezed and scrapped. We don't need tolerance. We need mutual respect. Every individual should respect each other.
Right. Wonderfully put. Yeah. Dr. Vaidya?
So nicely put. My next question is again, you see this period we have seen followers of different faith,
Yeah.
internalizing their mode of worship. We saw major events happening through this lockdown period. That makes us to also ask this question, and also on my personal experience, my father, aged relatives not being able to go to temples, but then we have found out new ways of reaching out to God. My kids have found new ways to learn new things in praise of the Lord and all of that. And since you rightly said Sanatana Dharma addresses the individual. Now, during this time, how much do you think that internalization process will help us in also understanding newer ways to reach to the Almighty, the Supreme? Has this given us new opportunities to worship the Lord in different forms? Are there any evidences to prove from the ancient scriptures that God can be reached in different forms? So if that's the case, the way in which, just as education, the way in which knowledge is getting transacted is changing. How are we, as somebody who would love to always go to temples, we definitely would want to go to temples again. But how is the future behavior of individuals going to get characterized when it comes to reaching out to God? Do you have any piece of advice to us?
Okay. Vaidya, just one or two pieces of information that I would like to share about general temple worship. When I say temples, I have absolutely equal respect towards other
Correct.
places of worship, be it the church or the mosque. Though I may not visit them often, I have equal respect for their followers. Now, coming to temples, where my piece of research and practices. Temples were first of all constructed from the earliest temples we know of, probably from the 1st, 2nd century, 6th century, during the Pallava period, Gupta period, Mauryan period, and then we come to the Chola, Pallava, Hoysala, Rashtrakuta, Chalukya, Kakatiya period. Temples were never meant as places of worship. Temples were meant as a congregation of various cultural activities. So if you wanted to attend a dance concert, it was in a temple. So there was a mandapa constructed for a dance recital. If you wanted to attend to the music concert, it used to happen in a temple. If you wanted the priests who have practiced Vedic hymns for years together, sit and recite Vedam together, it was in temples. So if you wanted food to be offered to God, it used to be made in the temple kitchens, used to be offered to God and then shared among devotees. So temple was a place of bustling activities. That is why most or probably all our temples that we know that have survived till date were constructed of stone in some form or the other. It could be hard rock, soft stone, soapstone, and so on. But kings and commoners never constructed their houses in stone. You have the temple of Brihadeeswarar temple in Tanjavur, a UNESCO monument to which Shastra has the proud association of that beautiful ancient city. Brihadeeswarar temple, which has survived over 1,000 years, is made of hard granite. But where is the king's palace? We don't know. Rajaraja Chola's palace, we don't know. Where is Rajendra Chola's palace? We don't know. Because the king and the commoners always constructed houses out of perishable materials like brick, timber, and so on. But they wanted the places of artful congregation like temples to survive for generations. So for us, temples are never meant for worship. But today, sadly, most paper articles, they say temples are open for worship, because in the last 100 years, the only thing that we feel that temples do is only worship. See, I remember a quote from one of the commentaries to Thiruvaimozhi. Thiruvaimozhi is the essence Kaveree may be able to appreciate, because most part of India will follows the Tamil, the Sanskrit Veda, like Tamil Nadu. But Tamil, also having had the proud lineage of being one of the very, very old languages, has the association of a saint called Nammalvar, called Shatakopa. And he gave a work called Thiruvaimozhi, which is the essence of Samaveda of Sanskrit. So to that work, which has been given maybe years, thousands of years back, we have had commentaries. A commentary 900 years before, probably of the 10th and the 11th century, the commentator makes a beautiful remark. He says that when we enter temple, what is our outlook towards the temple? He says, Pirar Kovilukul Nuraindal, Kovil is Srirangam, Kovilukul Nuraindal, if people get inside the temple, Kudirai Vottam Voduma Pole Voduvar, like horses that have been left out of the stable, that they will keep running towards the sanctum sanctorum, have a glimpse, a darshan of the Lord, and return. Whereas the commentator continues, Anal Bhattarum Narayur Nambiyum Tunai Patrasaga Kulvar. There were two people whom he illustrates. One is Parashara Bhatta and second is Narayur Nambi. He says, they are people, even before going to the sanctum sanctorum, they will embrace every pillar which is a piece of art. So even 900 years before, there was a section of society that thought temples were only meant for worship. They never appreciated nature. They never appreciated the architecture. But we had one small population then which used to appreciate the temple's architecture. So our motto towards temples should not be towards worship. Nevertheless, to your question, has this Corona period taught us the lesson? As a civilization, I can proudly say, Kaveree can proudly vouch, and you can say, we have very strongly believed that God is everywhere. Simple. There ends the point. So that Sarvajñatvam, Sarvavyapyatvam, and Sarvashaktitvam, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, has been completely realized. The anecdote of Prahlada saying that God is everywhere, Sarvatra asti, sada asti, and then God coming out as a man lion out of the pillar, is a blatant and a glittering example of the omniscience of the Lord. But the moment I say this, there are many, many complicated questions that come. When I go to my washroom and sit on the commode, is God in the commode?
Mhm.
First question, because I am sure people are going to ask me this question. One, if God is everywhere, is God present inside the coronavirus? Because if we say God is present everywhere, ideally he must be present inside the pathogen virus. If we say yes, then the problem is, how can God who is present in the virus cause so much of agony? So these are the questions that come. That is where there is a very concluding remark made by our Shastras. God is present everywhere, no doubt, underline, but he's untouched by the characteristics of that object. That's very, very clear. Suppose he's present inside Vaidya and Vaidya has 10 vices. Those vices will not affect him. He is there within you, but remains untouched. He is within the corona, but the evil aspect of corona is something that is not attributed to him. Just like how I may consume a sweet, let's assume the Kalakand or the Tirunelveli halwa of the south, that is so sticky. It sticks to my hands, it sticks to my legs, it sticks on my lips, but it doesn't stick to my tongue. So, like how it remains untouched with the greasiness of the halwa, God is present everywhere, but remains untouched by the blemishes of that object. So, this corona period has, of course, given us the knowledge that God is present everywhere. So, even sitting at home, I can do my namaz. Sitting at home, I can offer my Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John from the New Testament. I can sit at home and recite Tevaram and Trivasakam and Vishnu Sahasranamam, no doubt. But as a civilization, we have built temples not to demean this concept, but we have always believed temples have been a places of artful congregations. So my opinion is, after the corona period, when things start slowly returning to normalcy, I will want to come to Tanjavur and visit Brihadeeswarar temple. At the same time, that is not to defy the fact that God is not everywhere. He's still in my house as much as he's in Brihadeeswarar temple. So
I
this
also
corona
appreciate
period
the
is a
art.
realization.
Yeah. Thank you. Kaveri, do you have any audience questions that you want to ask now?
No, I don't have any, but I had one question here.
Hmm.
Of course, Dushyant must have been asked this 500,000 times, but this is something that I always feel very strongly about.
Mm.
How does God tell us to handle suffering? We know that there is suffering. We know that there's so much pain, and we've seen it during this coronavirus, especially. We see so much agony on the streets and even amongst ourselves. How do we best handle this agony, both within us and outside us, this suffering?
The I'm neither going to give a solution nor a justification,
Yeah,
but as you've rightly said, this is a question time and again people have asked me, and I have also asked the teachers who have dispensed knowledge to me.
right.
So whether the answer sounds convincing enough or not, at times the answer could be so brutally truthful that it may seem as unmerciful, like the Merchant of Venice, where a pound of flesh closest to the heart
Yeah,
without a drop of blood was asked.
right.
So with all these disclaimers, I would just like to say, your question was, with so much of sufferings around, right? Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma has a very clear statement. It says, only through sufferings you can wash away your sins.
Right.
So, in fact, our predecessors who have been our icons like Adi Shankara, Ramanuja, Madhvacharya, Vedanta Deshika, and many, many people who have lived in the across the country, they have one thing to say, which is, when sufferings come to us, it seems we should welcome them.
Yeah.
See, it seems so impractical and so asympathetic. See,
Right.
probably to a migrant worker today who doesn't know how to go from one place to the other, and I
Yeah.
say, see, welcome the suffering,
Yeah.
he's not going to like me and my statement.
Yeah.
But probably when the same person gets a piece of meal from some good, because this period, Kaveri, I'm going to tell you, beyond a lot of other things, it has brought us together as a wonderful
Yeah.
society.
Yeah.
See, when Rama had left Ayodhya along with Sita, he was an aristocrat. He was the platinum spooned child of Dasharatha. And when he comes to forest, he makes friends with Guha, who has never had the habit of bathing. He
Right.
makes friends with Sugriva, who's a monkey. He makes friends with Vibhishana, who's the estranged brother of Ravana. So he didn't look at the financial status, he didn't look at the caste, he didn't look at their practices. So in times of distress, the society comes together, and we should be hopeful it stays together. So that is a very wonderful thing that we have done. But the point is, if I tell a migrant worker now, welcome suffering, he's not going to do that. But probably 2-3 months later, when I visit the same migrant worker and I kind of talk to him, he will say, see, now I was getting food for last 2 years, and those 10 days were enough for my family to realize how important is the value of saving, Kaveree.
Yeah.
See, not that migrant workers don't get that extra 10 rupees to save. If you look at the alcoholic conditions of families in our country, they earn that very night, they drink, and there is atrocities meted in the family.
Right.
Probably had they saved that 10 rupees every day for 350 days, 3,500 would have got saved.
Yeah.
This will surely dawn in a lot of people's mind.
Right.
So suffering is absolutely an opportunity to realize. There's a great poetic statement which says, the sweetest of the poems come from the saddest of the thoughts.
Yeah.
Ramayana wouldn't have been this sweet had Rama and Sita not been separated.
Yeah.
So this season of sufferings, I'm not talking only about the migrant workers. Even the middle class families are affected. Even the aristocrats are affected. Yeah. Why should we talk only about one section? Everybody is affected. And it has a lesson for every strata, trust me. So this is a learning process. So if your question was, why should God make us suffer? It is not God making us suffer. It is our actions which are the cause.
My question was not why does God make us suffer, I understand that. My question was, how do we handle it?
Okay. Handling at the time being is to get our piece of meal. If I'm going to talk about the migrant workers, if I'm going to give them that meal for that day, that's going to help them.
Yeah.
And over a period of time, if they find employment opportunities, that is going to come. But beyond this, as a society, I feel probably a motivation speaker like me, there are many, many, many wonderful speakers and great speakers. We should all get together and probably find some 2 or 3 minutes of talks, capsule talks, which reaches even the migrant workers to make them feel good. See, today, if my talks have to reach, it reaches a Vaidhya. It reaches Vaidhya's family. It reaches Kaveree's family. They are important to me. But if my talks and my wordings in such a way that it makes it simple for a migrant worker to understand, why should they be deprived of such motivation ways? They are never exposed to motivation. All that they have to look for is, today I get my meal, tomorrow I have to work. Motivating them and giving them a lot of positive values, I think a lot of we, the spiritual speakers, should come out and create some content for them to make them feel good. That feel good factor, if it gets into the lower strata of the society, probably as a society, we'll get, like how Bhutan says, we don't calculate GDP, we go on the happiness quotient.
Yeah.
Probably that's the way ahead. We should realize how happy we are.
Yeah. Vaidya?
Yeah, I think Dushyanth has actually led us to the last part. Now, if that has to happen, the feel-good factor has to happen. I want to relate that with the Atmanirbhar Bharat.
Yeah.
To many of us, it is like a sankalpa for self-reliance. And I have heard you on many occasions in the past, and I want to hear you again on the significance of sankalpa as a concept, relating time and space. And I would request you to use this opportunity to engage in a samashti sankalpa, because we are now in the interest of well-being for all of us, all of humanity and nature. Can you please engage in a samashti sankalpa for a global well-being through realizing India's self-reliance, the power of Indian self-reliance? So that's the last part that I place before you.
Sorry, I'd just like to intervene here, Dushyanth Vaidyaji. As you know that I will be leaving at 6:15. So please don't think that I'm being very rude, Dushyanth. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. My pleasure, Kaveree. And I think the answer to this question is going to be very succinct and clear in that time period given, because
I did want to use
at all.
I did want to use this opportunity to thank you so much. I think it was a most wonderful, wonderful exposition of so many different ideas, which you put forward so well.
Thanks to you and Vaidya for that.
Yeah.
Very quickly, Atmanirbhar Bharat. Of course, Sri Narendra Modi ji has made this a sankalpam, which means to say collective willpower, that we all think about self-reliant country. There are a variety of things that people are talking about to boycott a certain country, to boycott the goods of certain country. That's different, and that's going to be to some extent on a political level. But when I'm talking about as a Indic speaker and a traveler, when I go to Switzerland, of course, Switzerland is known for its beautiful contours and those beautiful ranges. Even people living in Switzerland, they say, see, we as a country, when we are tourism dependent, we are not dependent on the inland population, because the population of Switzerland is so little that even if they visit twice or thrice, they will not get those revenues. So it's the revenues of the other Europeans, the Asians, the Americans who visit Switzerland that's going to add revenue to the Switzerland economy or the tourism industry. In India, we don't, when I say we don't, it essentially means that the domestic population is so very high that even if Kaveree visits Mahabalipuram and she takes 4 people along, Vaidya takes 4 people to Tanjavur, I'm sure our tourism industry is going to face the best of the times. So now people are worried, oh, the international fights haven't begun, so how will I visit Phuket and Siam Reap in Cambodia? That's not my problem. My problem is I have to visit the beautiful hills of Tripura. I have to visit the beautiful temples of Puri and Jagannath. So our land is infested with architectural marvels. So if Atmanirbhar Bharat has to begin, probably you can say we need manufacturing facilities of 10,000 cell phones. All that is there. The easiest thing that we can do is visit the closest archaeological spot. If we start doing that, India has 1.4 billion population, 3.5 times of, even 4 times that of US. And we start visiting, look at the amount of value we are going to add to our places. So my thought for Atmanirbhar Bharat is simply appreciating the contours of our own country, not to depreciate any other country, but to appreciate our country. And very quickly to the Sankalpa, space and time. Space is Akasham. Anything that's open is space, Akasham for us. And in Sanskrit, there is a term, Ghatakasham. Ghatam is pot. Space within a pot is referred to as the space of the pot. It's called Ghatakasham. So space is the place where we live in. Probably you may be living in Chennai, I could be living in Bangalore. Now that is space. Time. So we are in 2020. A lot of them say, don't even say the word 2020. That's so we are caught between 2019 and 21, if I can make it technically correct. So we are in a certain time period. So this time period and space is a resultant of we inheriting this from our past. So to probably put that in a graph of space and time is where we have this concept called Sankalpa in Sanskrit. So it goes like this. We start with who is the creator. We say Adya Brahmanaha, the one who has taken the efforts to put all these beautiful pieces of nature together. That Brahma, Adya Brahmanaha. And that Brahma has a period of 100 years. So the first 50 and second 50. So in the current Brahma's second 50th year, we are there. Dvitiya Parardhe, in the second 50th year. And in those 50 years, every year of Brahma has the same number of days, 365 days, whatever we talk about, it has the same number of days. But the length of the day varies. What happens is we have the 60 seconds that make a minute, 60 minutes that make an hour, 24 hours that make a complete day. So 365 such days make 1 year. 4,32,000 such years make Kali Yuga. Twice that, which is 8,64,000 years, makes Dwapara. 3 times that is Treta. 4 times that is Krita. So 4 plus 3 plus 2 plus 1, which is 10 into 4,32,000 years, 43,20,000 years is a term called as Chatur Yugam. 4 yugas together is called Chatur Yugam. That is 43,20,000 years. 1,000 such Chatur Yugams make the daytime for Brahma. 1,000 such Chatur Yugams make the night for Brahma. So 2,000 such periods make it the entire day for him. Likewise, there should be 365 days, and likewise, there should be 100 years for him. So there we say Dvitiya Parardhe, Shvetavaraha Kalpe, Vaivasvata Manvantari. The entire period of 1,000 Manvantaras is ruled by 14 supervisors. We are in the 7th supervisor, who's the sun, called Vivaswan. So in that 71 Chaturyugas, we are in the 28th Chaturyuga, Ashtavimshati Tame. And in that Chaturyuga, we are in the Kali Yuga. In Kali Yuga, we have crossed we are in the first quarter. So we are in the 1,08,000th quarter, of which 5,000 years are gone. So we say Kali Yuge, Prathame Pade, Jambu Dvipe, Bharatavarshe, Bharatakande, Meroho Dakshine Parshve. Meru is a mountain that we take as our benchmark. Meru is generally regarded as the Pamir Hills around the Karakoram range, north of Kashmir and Pakistan and Afghanistan. So we are south of that. So we say Meroho Dakshine Parshve. Then we pray to the Almighty that I am now located in this space and time. Please give peace to this society, to this world, sans any discrimination of religion, caste, community, belief, and let there be peace restored through this beautiful conversation arranged by Kaveree and Vaidya. And thanks to the New Indian Express Group and Shastra for having brought this discussion together. And let there be peace over a period of time in the minds of people who have been agonized to a large extent.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this discussion is going to kind of at least motivate to some extent a listener, whoever is going to listen or going to watch this episode.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Vaidya, over to you. Thank you.
I'm done. I'm just going to thank Dushyanth as well as Kaveree and the New Indian Express Group for putting together such a wonderful program. This program titled Expressions has clearly expressed in a very, very nice way, and finally concluded with a very touching message that calls for peace, for the global well-being. And I'm sure we are all going to bounce back stronger. So thank you very much, Dushyanth Sridhar, for your time.
Thank
and
you.
thank you, Kaveree,
Thank
for
you
staying
so
through.
much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Namaste.